All right. I guess we're live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Do it live. All right. All right. So I know we've got a few other people coming in. So before we really get started on the presentation, I just wanted to remind everybody who has not yet registered for the Open Source Intelligence Capture the Flag contest, otherwise known as the OSINT CTF. To get out there and register, go to osintctf.cgsilvers.com. If you need help with that, there's a booth over there with some blue and silver balloons. After this talk, you can go out and the lovely booth babes, Hannah and Chris, will help you get to the site and get you registered and all that stuff, right? We also have some warm-up challenges about Stormy Daniels just to kind of, flex your OSINT muscles and make sure you're able to log into the scoring engine and all that good stuff.
Wet your palate, as you will.
Wet your palate, if you will. Nice. You turn that mic up. All right. So, so again, just in case some other people are walking in, and one reason that that I'm starting with this is that this presentation starts with an audio clip. So I want to make sure not too many people are going to miss that clip because it's kind of important to the talk. So before we get to that point, first of all, I'm Chris Silvers. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Chris. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so that's awesome. And I'm accompanied by...
I'm Taylor Banks, and I am the principal hacktologist at Ace Hackware. And I see a few familiar faces as well. We haven't had the pleasure of meeting. I'm hanging out at his booth most of the time. So,
excellent. Excellent. Cool. All right. Cool. So we also another little thing. We also have a few swag packs to give away at the end of the talk for particularly intelligent, insightful, or humorous questions, depending on how many bags we have left. All right. So several up here. All right, so without further ado, we'll get going.
We checked audio levels, we're good?
Yeah, let's hope. We'll find out in a second.
All right.
All right, here we go. Ah! Fail! 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 Okay.
Okay, we'll do it live. Hold on.
Do it live! That's right. That's what we get. All right.
This is the same audio we tested a minute ago.
Yeah, of course. All right, let's try that again. No? Nada.
Should I power on the speaker?
Yes, you should power on the speaker. It's kind of important. All right.
I don't know what kind of volume we're getting. We can mic that though. Here.
Yeah, we can
mic it.
The speaker.
Let's see how this goes. It does.
Okay. We'll
It do.
All right. Ready?
Let's
Here we
see.
go. Here goes nothing.
Calling. First and last name. This is Joe. May I have your name, please?
Hey, Joe, this is Mike on the front line. What on earth is going on?
Wow.
We got the exact same call at the exact same time.
Oh, wow. That's weird. Yeah.
That is bizarre.
All right, so in case you guys didn't really get a handle for what you're hearing, this is essentially a phone call that we placed into a hunt group. And to give you a little bit of perspective, for those that don't know what a hunt group is, a hunt group is essentially call center terminology for basically a PBX component that when you call into a call center will automatically direct your call to one of any number of random recipients within the call center, right? So you've done this before. You've called for your AT&T bill, or you've called Comcast to complain about your bill, or you've called any number of other companies, and you dial in, and you could make 3 consecutive calls, and each of those consecutive calls, you're going to get a different call service rep or call center rep. In some cases, this is within the same facility. In other cases, those call center calls are actually distributed globally. So you might get one call, you'll talk to somebody in the Philippines, another call, you'll talk to somebody in California, and a third call, you'll talk to somebody in Texas. So that is the premise that we are taking advantage of in this presentation and in the call that you just heard. So Where did this come from? Where did the idea for this come from? Well, my name is Taylor Banks, and I am a freakaholic. The year is 1985.
Hi, Taylor.
The year is 1985, and three-way calling had recently been introduced. I had the desire to be the world's greatest computer super hacker and the world's greatest phone freak. I've never been arrested for a computer crime, so I was either really good at what I did or really shitty at what I did. I'll let you decide. But either way, I really enjoyed phone pranking. And when I first discovered three-way calling and realized that I could use this against call centers, I had a blast for quite some time doing exactly that. Initially, this actually began with the home shopping network. So I used to use three-way calling. I would dial the home shopping network. I would immediately click over on the line, dial the home shopping network again, and connect two of the home shopping network representatives. So they'd both answer the phone call, and within maybe a second or two of each other, they'd say, "Hey, thank you for calling the home shopping network. This is Bob. Would you like to buy the diamond?" Now, initially, it was kind of stupid. I'd get some weird calls. People would hang up. But after a few phone calls, all of a sudden, the people in the rep would start to realize or believe that their phones were misbehaving, that things were acting improperly. So as I would sit and listen, these reps would begin to talk amongst themselves. So they'd talk, and they'd say, "Oh, hey, Bob, that's so funny. I'm Jane. I'm in the Austin call center. Where are you?" "Oh, I'm in the Austin call center, too." "Oh, stand up and wave your hand." "Ah, hey, how are you doing?" "Ah, that's so funny." So this is great. I had a great time doing it, at least briefly. It got old kind of quickly, but then I realized that I could also then potentially inject myself into these calls by emulating their very simple pattern. So I would then call up, and as soon as somebody would answer, I wouldn't use three-way calling. Instead, the moment somebody would answer, I'd say, "Thank you for calling Home Shopping Network. This is Nancy. Would you like to buy the diamond?" I said Nancy, yes. I was 9 years old, so cut me some slack. You know, my voice wasn't quite as deep. So that said, this was the basic premise that essentially became the technique you guys are witnessing here in this presentation. So fast forward from 1985 to 2011, I was listening to a presentation that Chris was giving at our local DC 404 meeting. He was giving an early version of a talk that he would later deliver at GurCon called Go With The Flow. And in that presentation, he was playing back call recordings from an engagement he had done where he had basically done social engineering and used patter to manipulate individuals on the phone. Listening to these calls at the end of his presentation, I said, "Hey, I've got this really killer idea. While three-way calling isn't what it used to be, I wonder what would happen if we applied this same technique to information gathering for the purpose of social engineering." Enter Chris Silvers.
Yeah. So in that discussion, we just started kind of thinking, well, how could this be weaponized, right? Isn't that really what we do, right? We analyze a process of how it's supposed to work. We think about ways that it might work otherwise, right? Like abnormally, and then the next step is weaponize. So how could an attacker use it? Well, obviously, they could use this for reconnaissance, right? Just to get that pattern of, oh, they've got people in Austin, they've got people in Hollywood, and they're using this ticketing system or whatever, right? But could it be leveraged for credential harvesting? Right? What if one of the agents was to direct the other agent to a website where they had to log in, right? Maybe you're spoofing their ticketing system or something like that. Or could it possibly even go to the point where one of the agents says, "This has been happening a lot," convinces the other agent to go to a website, download and run an executable, right? Maybe, right? So fast forward a few more years of doing more phone social engineering, and I finally came up with a client who had the maturity in their security awareness and a really large, distributed call center enough to where this might be a viable scenario to be able to try it out, right? And they were gutsy enough to let me do it, right? So then, of course, I had to come up with a methodology because in penetration testing, yes, we're simulating attackers, but we're sort of bound by a methodology, right? We have to explain to the client, here's what we're going to do. So it kind of came out with this idea of, first of all, is the initial injection, right? Once I'm comfortable pretending to be an agent, do a little passive reconnaissance, in terms of telephone, this is just kind of playing dumb and just seeing where it goes. Or how do I say it? Go with the flow, right? Go with the flow of the conversation. But then after a while, once that comfort builds, actually start trying to guide the conversation over toward maybe some credential harvesting or something else, right? And then finally actually exploiting it and taking that next step and getting the other agent to download and execute, to run an executable, right? So, so what we're going to hear is the first stage, right? Is just the initial injection, and the goal here to this call is really and truly just to get a feel for the environment, not really pushing hard or anything, you know, to make sure we don't get caught. And what you're going to hear is a clip of a call, right? Not the entire call, because in the interest of time, we just want to get to the kind of the juicy bits of the call. So imagine this is kind of in the middle of a phone call, right? So let's listen.
Logged on. I'm in Exchange support. BizApp support.
Right.
Did you have was there another call a few minutes ago? Because I noticed one of my coworkers received a call. Now the telephone number that comes up in the call that I have from you right now is actually
Right.
your support. It's 1-800. So I was looking at this. I'm like, well, how am I getting a call from us?
Right.
But I'm not familiar with that. The phone system that you're using. I mean, I have a desk phone that's
Right.
it's like a Polycom desk phone.
Well, that's weird. And this actually happened to me like yesterday. I got like a call from Joe. He's over on the phone side, the phone support side.
Something to mention to team captain, and maybe have the PBX team look into it.
All right, excellent. All right, so what were we able to gather just by kind of playing along, right? We got Exchange support, BizApp support, so some internal terminology. He's on a Polycom. They call their supervisors team captains, right? PBX team. By the way, did anybody pick up on kind of a red flag that might have alerted them to this is kind of a little strange? Anybody notice kind of early in the call? No? Okay. So he said, I don't see you logged on, right? Well, I made the mistake of claiming to be in the same unit that he was in, potentially in the same room, right? So I learned on my next call, okay, I'm going to say I'm in a different area of their support, right? So that the chances of us being in the same room are slimmer, right? To avoid him standing up in the cubicle and going, Joe, where are you? Joe, where, that kind of thing. All right. So moving right along, at this point, it becomes actually just kind of staying on the phone and just trying to stay engaged, right, with whoever I'm talking to, and just hoping that more intelligence will come. So listen in here.
Because I'm using the soft phone.
I am too.
Yeah? Huh. Well, that's weird.
I'm on my PC. On my laptop.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I wonder if
it's happened before in the past. It's happened before in the past. Something with the hunt groups where sometimes their route calls weird.
Right.
But I use three different browsers. It has nothing to do with the browser. I've got Chrome, IE, and Netscape or Firefox up.
Huh. Well, that's
Mosaic.
strange. Are we supposed to report this or something to somebody, or?
Nah. It just happens.
I love that. It's nah, it just happens. Okay. Yeah, this guy was nice, right? So picked up some more pieces of information, right? PC laptop. The term hunt group is familiar to them. He's using Chrome, IE, Firefox, that kind of stuff.
I'm going to add one thing, and I think we'll actually cover this in a little bit more detail later, but I think it's a pretty appropriate point to interject this as well. So something that you saw happen in that second call was the individual that was reached was already a little bit disarmed, right? He says, no, this happens all the time. Don't sweat it. It's not a big deal. And so in essence, by having done this multiple times, and I'll point out that we've got about 85 other calls worth of data that weren't from an engagement Chris did that I was doing when testing to make sure this technique would work in this particular fashion. But given that, having multiple calls back to back, you can see the disarming nature. People they're getting used to the fact that the phones are misbehaving. They're getting used to the quirks and multiple reps getting connected together. And so, again, there's kind of a lowering of the guard as this occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. And the expected progression is that it will become socialized and people will expect it, and then it will become an issue that someone needs to do something about, right? And much like the go with the flow, it's sort of like, bugging them until finally they decide to do something about it, which is what I want to happen as the attacker, right? So the next step in this is actually to start leveraging that conversational lubrication, right? To kind of leverage that to start actually guiding and maybe a little direction on the conversation, right? So here's where it starts to get real.
Online right now? Probably not.
No, I guess not.
Strange,
Well,
yeah.
that's weird. Are you using a PC or are you on a Polycom?
I'm on both, actually. The call came through my Polycom, like a regular hunt group call, so I just kind of just picked up. And I mean, there's account info here, but I don't know why it's there. The number's calling from our regular support phone number, though.
Something's going on. You're not on a Mac, are you?
No, I'm on a just regular Windows 7 machine. Yep. Do you have any like customer info on your screen?
No, I don't. It came up and it was saying, ask for customer ID, or account ID. So, well, that's weird. Okay. Who's the supervisor over there? Because I'll get my team captain to get in touch with them.
Yeah.
Okay. Withrow. Okay.
All right, so you can see starting to use their own lingo against them, right? Just to kind of keep that authority in place, right? That trust relationship. And of course, getting a few more pieces, account info on screen, Windows 7, his supervisor's name, that type stuff. And here's another one where this next call, there were a few more like this that were directed, but this next call was the one that really tipped me over the edge.
What's going on here?
You want to talk to tech support?
I guess so. I mean, I'm with the Exchange Group, the Biz Apps, but I don't know. I mean, would I need to escalate that to voice services maybe, or aren't they in charge of the next gen?
Or ISA, internal? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I got
that's
the
really
little
weird.
PTX picture of your incoming call that says caller ID 800, and it says call from voice onboarding hunt group.
Are you home support, or you there in the office?
I'm working in the office.
Huh. That's weird. I mean, it happened at the beginning of my shift. Did you just come on, or?
No, I've been here since 7.
Yeah, because like I said, Troy, I think he said that he had just logged on, and that was, I mean, you hadn't logged off and logged back on or something, had you?
Yeah, I just came back from lunch. I just logged back into the queue.
Ah, okay. Well, that might explain it. It might be like when you first log in.
All right, so I was hoping Joe Gray's not in here, is he? Okay, I thought maybe there were some flags there that I got just kind of for the funsies, of finding out that when she came in and when her lunch break was. That was just kind of, as you can tell, you can probably hear it in my voice. I was becoming more confident, right, with the whole conversation. So to review, she talks about tech support. She called it ISA, and I was able to, with a little other OSINT, figure out what ISA stood for and all that kind of stuff. And then her office location, her break and all that stuff. So essentially, what that did was it gave me confidence. It was like, okay, I'm ready now. I've got all this information. I'm ready to really, really direct the conversation now. I think I can speak with enough authority to guide someone else. So this one's a little bit longer because I wanted to kind of show you a little bit more of the call, the setup itself.
Thank you for calling onboarding. This is Tyson. May I have your name, please?
Hi,
Hello?
think we must have. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we must have gotten crossed because I'm with the advisor team, so I'm not sure why the call came through to both of us.
That's weird. This is Tyson. I'm with onboarding. The Hunt group just showed up. Okay. I'm sorry. What was your name?
Renee.
Renee? And
Yes.
and who are you with, Renee?
I'm with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Are you in
The call
voice
came
or
to me
biz
as
app?
well.
Okay.
Yeah, the
you know,
call came to me as well.
Okay. Well, that's strange. This actually happened yesterday, but it was another onboarding call. So it was another onboarding tech. Okay. I actually have a ticket open with ISA on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I spoke with Howard. Did you? And he wanted to find out. Are you using the new next gen phone system, the upgraded system?
No, I'm using the old system that I got like 3 years ago.
Wow. Okay. So you're just using the Polycom instead of the browser plugin.
Correct. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have a few seconds? He wanted me to gather some information because this seems to be happening a good bit lately.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So what kind of system are you? Are you on a Wise system or a laptop or?
I'm on a Wise.
Okay. You're on Wise, and that's running Windows 7, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And Renee, are you I guess you're in the office, right? Are you in?
No, I'm a home worker.
Oh, okay. Home worker. All right. Okay, home worker. All right. And do you know if so do you have Service Pack 1 on the Wise system?
I was just upgraded to the new Service Pack.
Okay.
Let me see,
Is that showing Service Pack 1? It should be build 7601.
Only way for me to see that is if I actually log out. I believe I have to.
Well, actually, he said the easiest way to get this information is just to go out to .com, and that'll do a quick inventory and show operating system and software stuff. Yes, .com. This is plural, I guess.
This is a gaming website.
Yeah, it's just real easy. There's a if you go to like my computer information, there's a download called detection that you can run, and it'll produce a report.
Computer details. Okay, view computer
Right.
details. Okay, I have Service Pack 1, build 7601, 64-bit.
Yeah. All right. So are you on the advanced tab, or?
I was on basic. I'll put the advanced.
Right. Yeah. Click on advanced and then scroll down, and then that'll show operating system build. And you said 7601, right?
Yes. I'm on Windows 7.
Perfect.
Service Pack 1, build 7601.
Okay, so I kind of confirmed that she had run the executable. I asked her a few other questions on the advanced tab, but you guys get the idea, right? She literally went to an unknown website, downloaded an unknown program, and ran it, right? No big deal, easy peasy. Now, every now and then, things don't go quite as planned, right? Because apparently this company, their implementation of computers and what access was not necessarily standardized. So I had a little trouble with this one, and so let's listen to this. It's a little shorter. By the way, so essentially this call went the same as the last one until I got to taking her to the website to download the executable, right? So pretty much the same until we get to the website.
To my computer details?
Then, yeah, my computer details.
I can't run this. So it's asking me to run an executable. That's not something I can run.
Right.
ISA won't allow it, yeah.
That detection.exe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, he said,
I don't have permission.
oh, it won't let you run the executable?
No, I'm not the admin here, so.
Okay. Well, that's strange. Okay. Let me, okay. Yeah, he said if you get permission issues on the exe, okay. And Kathleen, what was your last name? All right. And you said you're in,
I'm in onboarding.
Cloud Exchange?
Cloud onboarding, business onboarding.
So yeah, so I continued to ask her a few more questions just to kind of make it, you know, a little more real and to have a smooth exit. But she was not able to run the executable, right? Her account just didn't have permissions, right? Which kind of brings us to our first takeaway, which I really like. You know, how about take away admin rights for your users? Can I get an amen? Thank you. You know, the two most powerful words in fighting social engineering, I can't. Right? Because what am I going to say? Well, yes, you can. Right? No, I really can't. Right? So some other protections. Obviously, it's social engineering. You know, there's awareness. Right?
Absolutely.
There's that reporting process and culture. Rewarding people for reporting things even if they made a mistake. How about that? What a concept, right? Making sure that your staff are familiar with each other, or maybe, you know, have kind of a key word or some key terms that they can use to identify each other. Right?
Although I would argue that if you do an effective job of performing this attack, you'll pull that out pretty early on in the process,
yeah,
and
true.
That'll also become a quick flag. So.
Yeah. True. And bottom line, when it comes down to it, test, right? Yes, you have a question.
Yeah, the call before the last one, when they mentioned the gaming thing, the site you were sending the people to, was it something that actually looked legitimate?
No. That's what was so impacting about this, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but yeah, that's what was so impacting. I just literally spoofed a gaming website, a web, you know, and yeah, I mean, it's crazy that she just went right on by that. You know, she said something about it, but yeah, I just didn't react.
Something I'll point out too is that while all of these takeaways are very valid and they are all good preventative measures, as I mentioned, while not on an active engagement, I did approximately 85 calls using this technique back in 2012. And I'll say 2 of the organizations with whom or to whom I performed this process have extraordinarily mature security programs. So we're talking about very big companies whose names you undoubtedly know. Many of us probably know some of the folks that work in security at those organizations. But because I was relentless, because I performed this process so many times, it became unsuspicious, right? It really appeared to be glitches in the PBX. And I mean, the reality is, who of us here have not had a problem placing a call that's resulted in a crossed call or some mix-up or some PBX error? So if you're relentless, you'll find that even good security awareness culture can ultimately be defeated.
Yeah, it just comes down to that culture of how they're going to respond. I did a recent engagement a few weeks ago where this technique didn't work as well because their culture was, oh, we're gonna create a ticket on it, and we're done. Mm-hmm. And there's nowhere to go. Nobody has any interest in troubleshooting, right? So it presented some more challenge. So like Taylor said, you really have to make this a problem, right? And it has to become so common, right? Yeah, and maybe use some of these kind of advanced tips.
So, and these are a couple of things we talked about. I think this also, you know, ultimately there's a lot of ways that you can play out a social engineering call, but I think some of the things that you can also use and really manipulate to your advantage are, you know, certain essentially psychological principles that are going to play in your favor. So one of the things that you can do if you're going to play out this technique is really to use deference, right? To say, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, it's not even me. Let me check with Bob. Hold on. Bob, my boss wanted me to get this information. Hey, Bob, no, she's saying she can't run it. Which website? Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'll tell her. She said no, but you got it. So the boss tells me that he really needs this information, and believe me, I understand it seems really weird. What a strange website, but what's that? No, I don't want to get fired, right? So obviously, a little bit more thought, a little bit more planning, and a little bit more time. But using deference and not trying to be the authority on the call will almost undoubtedly work in your favor, right? Pass the buck a little bit. Be another player. You're just another rep answering the phone, right? You're just somebody else in the same call center who's dealing with the exact same problem that the person on the other end of the phone you're talking to is having. And the second thing that I would also strongly encourage is sympathy, right? Is really play this out. If you really want to just go hard with this, say, oh my God, this is the 5th time this has happened to me. There's only 2 people in my entire call center this has happened to. I am so going to get fired. I can't even believe this is happening again. They told me if I kept getting calls like this play to the sympathy of the person you're speaking to. Again, ultimately you're dealing with human beings. And again, I think something that you can understand, or that you should understand, is that the more you've built up the expectation around this in advance, the more calls you've placed, the more reps that have gotten crossed with each other, legitimate reps, people who know each other or people who don't, but people who can verify information about each other, the more you build the case for this being a real incident, the more things like deference and sympathy are going to absolutely play in your favor, because it's expected, because they know the phones are acting up. This is the 9th time this has happened today. This is the 5th person in your call center that you've seen get these weird calls. So really, is there anything else suspicious about it? And then,
Have a question?
Yep.
No, absolutely not. In fact, the engagement that I was mentioning, where I was kind of having some trouble, I ended up kind of changing tactics and called pretending to be a representative of the company that helps them with their phone systems, and which I was immediately transferred to a supervisor, which is usually the kiss of death, right? When they transfer you to a supervisor, the call's done. But this supervisor just started spilling the beans to me, which I wish I would have figured that out earlier, and just started telling me all this stuff about what they had done to troubleshoot the problem. In fact, even started telling me about all these robocalls that they had been getting, and that those were an issue as well. So it just provided more and more avenues to that. And it's weird. On that same engagement, I tried to inject myself a little bit early in the process, and didn't realize that the person I was pretending to be sat in the same room as the person I was talking to. And halfway through the conversation, the guy went, "Why are we talking about this on the phone? I'm just going to come to your desk." Click.
Well, and to your question, I will say, ironically, in one of the research calls, again, dealing with a company not during an engagement, but just doing the research, I did have 2 reps connected, and one of the reps says to the other rep, "Man, this is funny. There's probably another person on the call." And the other rep says, "No, this has been happening all day." And they spent another 12 minutes on the phone talking to each other, during which time they mentioned internal processes, the name of their ticketing system, and a couple of other major red flags. So after first one of the representatives being suspicious, the other representative then proceeded to dispel any notion that this was a suspicious call by, in fact, indicating this has happened again. And I will say, in a somewhat of a similar manner, at another one of the research calls, I actually connected 2 executives' assistants. So not anybody in the individual technical departments, nobody in IT, but these were assistants to information security executives, and they connected, and because they knew each other, and because their company had also been having PBX problems all day long, they then proceeded to spend about 35 minutes on the phone together, talking about internal details and talking about things that would be information exclusive to these particular executives' offices. So the fact that they knew one another and were in the same building in that particular case actually, to a certain degree, worked to the advantage of information gathering on that particular call. So it's odd, but again, I think part of the success in that also is how relentless you are in building the case for this being a real issue. If you do one research call, or you only connect 2 people and then you inject, you probably have a stronger possibility of getting busted because it doesn't seem normal yet. It hasn't become part of the process. The one other thing on this slide that I'll point out too, and somebody asked the question, was this a legitimate looking site? not only was it not necessarily, it was a gaming site, but the other thing that I've done both in research phase and that we've talked about doing on engagements is going after and using early vocent flags to then register a domain. So again, in the research phase, one of the companies that I was dealing with, one of the earliest things that they dropped was they dropped the name of their internal ticketing system, which was relatively unique. It was kind of specific to the company that I was doing the research with. So I went out and registered that name, support.com, right? It cost me $7, and now for $7, I had a domain that essentially looked like the name of their internal ticketing system. So even though theoretically they should know how to get to their own internal ticketing system, if I then proceed to try to lure them to this offsite third-party domain, it's much less suspicious because it essentially mirrors internal lingo that nobody except the folks within their internal technology departments should even know, much less, you know, be able to go get a domain for.
And adding to that, pretty soon GDPR is going to be, you know, removing a lot of that who is data, so it's just even easier to get away with those kind of things. All right. So, any other questions? Sorry. Yes.
So, kind of about the whole social engineering aspect, but kind of, what are your recommendations for them fixing this? Because I mean, people got to talk internally. Are you recommending that they just hang up when this happens, or how do you what do you tell businesses to, you know, counter this?
Yeah. Again, it goes to that last bullet, right? You know, nobody thought of, you know, email phishing as an attack vector however many years ago, right? So everybody was really vulnerable. Now, a lot, you know, it's pretty widespread that companies are getting more and more savvy to especially basic email phishing techniques because they've tested and they've raised awareness. So, you know, I think that it's partly awareness that this type of thing could happen.
I would underscore, though, and say also really it's the lack of process, because the companies that I was dealing with, again, they have very mature security programs. They're very big companies with lots of people working in information security. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, this is kind of a new vector. I mean, it's not, again, flashback to 1985, would you like to buy the diamond? But the reality is most companies haven't considered the fact that their own internal technology representatives might be used against themselves. And so really the lack of a process around this is part of the problem. If there was a process wherein they said, oh, no problem, we've been having this issue all day, hold on 1 second, let me verify some details. What was your name? What was your employee ID? Right. What's your PBX extension number? What's your department name? So, you know, again, if that information is then gathered by the internal representatives, it's a whole lot easier to kind of quash the notion that the person on the other end of the line is indeed a legitimate representative.
Yeah. And of course, you know, nothing's perfect, but again, these are just kind of mitigating factors. But do you have a question up front?
Yeah. I was going to say, you ran into a little bit of a stop when you have an organization that their immediate response is to just open up a ticket. Well, depending on the size of the hunt group that you're calling into, if you get 50% of the hunt group to open up tickets, that opens up another vector to say, hey, this is Bob, I'm calling from ISA. I saw a ticket you opened up. And did that as well. So that even using that as kind of a defensive measure, there's still an easy bypass.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, it's you can mitigate, but you know, because this is, I think the term we used was a vocent. I've never heard that before, but we kind of came up with that idea that it's kind of live intelligence. You know, each call is just adding to it. So even if they have some verification of each other, well, I'm picking that up too, right? So then I can simulate it.
And that was what happened on this last call. Is we had a conversation afterwards, and the next step was, okay, so what if you pretend to be the support, right? What if you pretend to be the company that makes the PBX, and you call in and say, hey, geez, we heard you're having all these PBX problems. I'm Bob from PBX support, right? So ultimately, a lot of vectors get opened up. And again, one of the things that I'm going to really hit hard is, you know, in making this work in practice, in my research and my experience, what I found is the more you connect internal reps before the injection phase, the more likely you're going to be to get more information later on, and the more likely it's going to be successful when you then inject yourself into the call.
At some point, somebody needs to troubleshoot the issue and realize there's not a problem with the system, right? They validate the system's working fine. Something else is the problem. Let's escalate this to, could it be this type of attack? I've heard of this kind of attack. I was in NolaCon a couple of months ago, and some guys did a presentation on this exact thing.
It's so weird. We're in Southern California, and we all keep getting connected to this guy with a Southern accent.
Yeah. He keeps stumbling and stuttering and all that stuff, right? We had another question back here.
You brought the parallel of this as compared to fishing. And
Right.
there seems to be a whole lot of similarities to it. As far as the response from the corporate world, the customers you're working with, do you see any movement forward towards training or technology to try to...
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's slow. It's crawl, walk, run for sure. Because most companies are still in that kind of basic compliance mode as far as phishing their own employees. But I am seeing medium-sized businesses, because that's where the sweet spot is, right? The medium-sized businesses that have real money for attackers to take, right? It's not just some small mom and pop, but they don't have the resources to have even a chief information security officer, or really any security people with security in their titles, right? I think that's the sweet spot. The Fortune 500 are handling this. They're moving. They're beyond that, right? They're doing actual email phishing, and they're doing actual voice phishing stuff. But mid-cap companies, they're not there yet. But I am seeing it. I mean, look at FishMe, look at KnowBe4, look at these companies are they're growing leaps and bounds, right? They're selling these subscriptions left and right.
And email phishing is still a problem to this day.
It is.
I want to add a sidebar.
But at least they're getting more advanced, right? At least the typical, you have a FedEx package, click here, is usually not getting near the click rates they used to.
Yeah. So quick sidebar, and neither Chris nor I are attorneys, but I will also point out in the research that I did in Chris's engagements, you see that we recorded these calls. If you are going to record calls while doing this during an engagement, make sure that both you and your target are in states that don't require two-party authorization for recording.
Well, actually, as long as they own the PBX system,
Sure.
That's part of the contract, is permission to record, right? So that's included in the contract. So, obviously I have my own permission, and the company owns the phone system, and I have their permission. So I have both parties in a contractual.
In many cases, the other edge you have there as well is when you call in and you hear that message that said these calls may be recorded for quality purposes. In essence, you've been notified the call has been recorded, and also at that point in time, you then have the right and opportunity to record the call yourself. You shouldn't tell somebody else that, or they will often disconnect the line. But at that point in time, because you've been notified, you have dual party consent.
Yeah, I've actually tried that when I call support and I hear that. I say, do you mind if I record it as well? And I'm about 50-50 on whether or not they hang up or not. Another question, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously you have your engagement parameters that your client okayed and signed it. So I'm not saying anything like that. But I'd like to know a more normal pen test. You said that you in fact did create like a legitimate problem for the client. And even though I know they okayed all of that, I'm wondering, does it occur at some point? Do you ask how far is too far? Because you're like, again, I'm not saying you went out of bounds, but so normally if you spend enough effort, you will get it.
Right. Yeah, and of course any engagement letter, and this is discussed during a kickoff call. Every engagement I've ever done is, how far am I going?
Sure.
Where is my limit? Right, when you're defining scope, and these days, the more sophisticated clients want you to go as far as you can go. I mean, look at how we do red teaming now, right? You guys are sending fish emails all over the place. You're dropping USBs. You're making phone calls.
Cloning badges.
Cloning badges. All kind of stuff on these red team exercises that 5 years ago would have been considered out of bounds. Yeah. But because patching systems are working now, you're having to rely on the people to get your toehold.
I would also put it somewhat on the time factor too. So, like in Chris's case, he was doing these engagements, and this was, a dozen or so calls that you hear clips from. Even when I was doing this again in 2012, I did 85 calls. That was in less than 24 hours time. So in 24 hours time, I gathered an incredible amount of information that, again, could easily be weaponized to then, take that company places they didn't expect to go. So, I would argue that even though you start having to redefine what the bounds are, any vector that can be so quickly and so easily manipulated in order to gain that much leeway and that much of a beachhead into an organization's network, I would argue it's still a very valid consideration, right? If it's something that I can do in less than 24 hours with a minimal amount of planning, somebody with more time, more resources, and backing of nation state, right, is certainly going to take the time, take the energy, and put the effort.
Yeah,
into it.
absolutely. The threat we're simulating here is not really that advanced.
Right. It's
right?
not.
And
It's one of the least
certainly easy
advanced
enough.
threats, right? It's somebody
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
calling in on the phone and saying, oh, shucks, me too.
Yeah. Well, and with all the caller ID spoofing, I mean, it's just stupid simple
Yep.
to get that done. Correct. Yeah. All right. So any other questions? I know we have some swag bags to hand out to several of you. So if you ask the question, come on up. Unless there are any other questions. That really didn't tempt. Okay, good. Yeah.
Mhm.
That is a question. Well, I'm glad you had an aha moment, right? Because that's what it's about. Right? A mwaha, yeah, that's
Exactly.
even better, right? We could make $1 million with this, right? Yeah. It kind of ruins your pretext if you do that. If you go,
You
download
on
this.
the lasers team?
Excellent. All righty. Well, thanks everybody for your
Thank you for
time.
coming.
Come by the. Don't forget to come by the booth and.